you tell little kids that if you want something bad enough, you can get it if you work hard enough.
Yeah.
And so, but the part you don't want to tell them because it's discouraging. But the truth is you can work really, really hard and still not get it.
Exactly.
And,
in lots of areas of life,
in lots
right?
of
And lots
areas.
of careers
That's right.
and lots of
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah. You can work your tail off and sometimes shit happens and that's unfair and you'll feel all different kinds of ways about it. But that's the reality. And like, I think, again, like, would it have changed anything? If I would have known that was going to happen, would I have changed what I did? No, because like, I'm so thankful for the time that I had in the military and the friends that I made and the experiences that I did have. Those went a long way to shape me as a person. And
welcome to Are We Happy Yet? Where we're all about having the tough, thought-provoking conversations about what it really takes to live a fulfilling life, without buying into the latest wellness trends, miracle cures, or life hacks.
If you're someone who's curious and likes to dig beneath the surface, join us. We're here to explore why, despite having access to more information and technology than ever, studies show that global unhappiness is at a record high.
This question kept nagging at us. Why are so many of us feeling more anxious, disconnected, and lonely than ever before?
I'm Hannah Buzzo, licensed therapist.
And I'm Jane Thatcher Hahn, licensed clinical social worker.
Together, we'll challenge the quick fix advice culture and dive into the big questions about happiness, success, and well-being.
In each episode, we'll share candid conversations and personal stories, unpacking the cultural narratives that shape how we live, love, and work. No solutions, no formulas. Just honest, thought-provoking dialogue that invites you to think differently about the world around you and your place within it.
So whether you're feeling overwhelmed by the pressure to have it all figured out, or simply curious about what lies beyond the mainstream wellness conversation, you're in the right place.
Welcome to the club. You're not alone in wondering what will finally, truly make us happy. So Hannah, I have brought you a very special guest today.
Just for me?
Just for you.
Pajamas and all?
Pajamas and all. You can't see it because...
New pajamas.
I'm so excited.
These are Christmas pajamas.
We tilted it back so you can't see. You know, business professional
Plaid
top.
is very distracting, I'm told. I wore solid colors with the things.
So this is Sean Endsley. Sean Endsley is one of our dear friends that we love very much. And I just so happened to be at one of his like amazing Christmas cocktail parties. And I looked at him and I was like, duh, Sean should be on the podcast. And then I said, be on the podcast. And he was running around chasing children. And I was like, cool, yeah, bye, see ya. And so now he's here and we're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Do you know what you signed up for?
I think so.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But I do know the exits in the room.
Okay.
Also.
Yeah. You're facing the doorway
I could
just
probably
in
get
case.
through that window in a pinch.
Do you want to go through all those cobwebs up there?
If it comes to it, it won't slow me down.
So, we've known Sean for what?
Oh boy.
A while.
Long time, yeah.
Long
Feels like a
time.
long time. Feels like forever.
Yeah. Wow, rude.
Long time.
And he's one of those people that I've watched go through a lot of different things and handle with a lot of grace and really beautifully. And
Thank you.
I think a lot of people have watched your life and just, well, for me personally, like, how the fuck is he doing that? Keeping it all together and staying positive, and you just have a really interesting story, so we're grateful that you're here.
That's very kind
to share that.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I know you've obviously thought the same about me.
Yeah,
frequently.
I was almost there. Just give me one more beat. If you just let the silence hang for a minute, somebody will probably fill it.
With compliments? Yeah, I got to work on that better. Yeah.
And obviously, very mutual. Love you guys a lot, and I'm very happy and honored to be here. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Mm-hmm.
So you have many identities. You're many things. The part of your history that I know where it begins is the part where you went into the military. I'm not quite sure what happened before that.
Yeah.
So if there's anything interesting there, feel free to throw it in. But as to like therapists, white girls, can you share with us like your journey with the with the military, like what drew you to it, why you went into it, all of that experience, and then we can kind of work through some of the other things.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I grew up in Centennial, Colorado, back when it was Inglewood.
Did they split it up?
They changed it. My parents were both school teachers. My dad taught high school mathematics for 36 years, taught 8 years at Littleton, 28 years at Cherry Creek. My mom was kindergarten, first grade teacher. Her career, and then once she had 3 boys, she became a full-time stay-at-home mom. And I did not come from a military family. The youngest of 3 boys, and just grew up in sort of the traditional, American like sports and family and scouts, and we had access to religion, but it wasn't like piled upon us. My dad was a Catholic. We were raised Presbyterian and went to Sunday school, and then Easter service, kind of Christmas Eve service, but it was never like a cornerstone or foundation like you have to where this is. It was more of like, this is we think it's a good chance for you to meet other kids and have a Sunday routine and stuff like that. But I think my childhood was it felt pretty unremarkable. Looking back, I think the most remarkable thing about it was just how stable and loving and kind it was. Really largely trauma-free. And my brothers were awesome. They remain awesome. They're big parts of my life, and were like the older brothers that were protectors and not like abusers. And I looked up to them and aspired to be like them. And so all of that to say that I think that my perception of the military, or maybe what I gleaned from reading and history of Vietnam and draftees and things like that, was that the military at times has maybe preyed upon different demographics of people or things like that, and it presented opportunity for those who otherwise wouldn't have it. But, I graduated from Cherry Creek in 97, went up to Colorado State University, which was my first choice because I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Wow.
And so I had worked in a vet clinic for the last 2 years of high school, and thought that was sort of my glide path, and went up to school and loved Fort Collins, loved Colorado State. During that time, I really kind of changed my lifestyle, my body. I really got physically fit, and I was a late bloomer, so I did most of my growing in college and things like that. And I don't know, growing up, I had played Army, I played G.I. Joe, I played in the backyard with the neighborhood kids and all those things. And it wasn't something that was viewed as abnormal or discouraged or toxic or anything like that. And and so it was part of who I was, but it was never really in my mind, it wasn't like a realistic goal because I was the short, fat kid and just wasn't like super physically active. And I played sports, but wasn't like a standout in sports or anything like that. So when I got to college and sort of was able to find my own identity and decide who I was going to be for that next chapter of my life, I started to look at that a little more earnestly and be like, hey, this feels like a little bit more like something that I would really want to do, and is not just glorify or romanticize through books and cartoons and movies and things like that. I did change gears from veterinary medicine to criminology because I thought maybe I'll do some forensic biology since I had like a biology background, and I'll do the military and then maybe some law enforcement. But I was just sort of finding my way like so many people do at that age. And I think the big catalyst for me, like so many people, was I was finishing my junior year or starting my junior year when September 11th happened. And that to me, partly because of who I was and my upbringing and my love for my country, felt like a call to action, call to arms. And so I took my parents intervened and were like, hey, where are you right now after the events of 9/11? Because they knew I was interested in the military and things like that. And I said, I'm around. And so they talked like, look, like, we would really like you to finish your degree. It's important to us. I think you'll be glad you did. And just the military will always be there. And so I did that. And so that's when I switched gears to criminology, finished school. And then I took them to dinner and said, hey, I did what you wanted me to do. And I'm glad that I did it. And I appreciate the direction and that. But now this is what I want to do. And I expect you to support me and be behind me. And to their credit, I think they're, terrified and probably on some level sad and scared. I mean, now we're a country at war, and they knew what all that entailed. And specifically what I wanted to do in the military was to be a Green Beret and to be, a special forces soldier. And so like they knew that would mean I would be fighting a war. And so that's how I kind of, in 2003, my parents drove me down to MEPS in Denver, and I made them, just like the first day of school, I made them drop me off down around the corner where the other kids couldn't see me. Jumped out with my duffel bag and walked into the MEPS building, and that's
What's MEPS?
MEPS is the military entrance processing station or something like that, and it's right downtown there in Denver.
So like you're signed up already.
I'm signed up. They're dropping me off to get on a bus to the airport, to a plane to go down to Fort Benning, which is now called Fort Moore in Columbus, Georgia, for Army infantry basic training and airborne school. And then from there, I had an 18 X-ray contract, which is a special forces recruit, which didn't mean that you would be a Green Beret. It meant that you would have a chance to try out for it. And so after infantry basic in the fall and winter of 2003 and airborne school in the spring of 2004, I was on a bus up to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, now Fort Liberty in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And that's where I started special forces indoctrination training, like preparation and conditioning training. So that would be now the spring and early summer of 2004.
So like, what's the screening process? You're like, hey, mom and dad, I'm going to the military. And then like, next thing we know, you're like dropped off downtown. Like, what's the process? What was your emotional state?
Yeah. So
did you lie a bunch to get in?
I had to get a lot of waivers. I had to get a lot of waivers.
What does that mean?
Waivers for like the military, the new military, when I say the early 2000s military, is they are wanting the best of the young people, not the dregs. It's not a draft situation. So you're not conscripting people into servitude. People want to join, and you want to make sure that they are the right fit for the needs of the military. So it was like, you had to, and some of these things are not like brain busters, but my waivers were for little scrapes I'd gotten into in college and breaking the law a little bit, and a criminal mischief charge here and there, or a fight. I got a charge for fighting and stuff. And like, that has to all be explained away and cataloged with paperwork to show like this person's not a violent domestic abuser or a drug, a drug addict or something like that. So it's a lot of screenings, a lot of physicals, a lot of, there's an ASVAB test, which is like your basic aptitude battery, and verbals, like just like a basic verbal math, reading, comprehension. And then for the special forces recruit contract, it was a little more in depth. Like, you had to have, as part of that ASVAB, one of the things they derive is a GT score, which is sort of roughly equated to your IQ. And so you had to have a GT score of 110 or higher to qualify for Ranger, SEALs, SF, Marine, Raider, those kinds of things. And then I think at the time, for the 18 X-ray contract, you even had to have a couple years of college. Wow. And so so I had already graduated college and was coming in as an enlisted man, which most people who join the service after they have a college degree are officers. But for this 18 X-ray special forces recruit, there were a lot of young men just like me who were college graduates. Maybe they'd been a year or two in the workforce as teachers, investment traders. And then when 9/11 happened, they answered the call to stop doing those things and come and join the fight. So,
this is going to be maybe a red flag, but I was like in third grade for 9/11. So I wasn't like, what was the call? Was it an actual call? Was it a feeling? Was it culturally? Like, what was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, at that time, and obviously the hindsight, anytime you get more information, like would I feel the same way about it now as I did then? Probably, because I think I believe and believed then that we were attacked. And like, certainly there's some nuance to that. And, there's a lot of there's a rabbit hole that you can go down to decide who the people behind the scenes pulling the strings were. But on the at the surface, on September 11th, 2001, we were attacked. And I, was already interested in the military, and that was just sort of the nudge to be like, well, now we were attacked, and what are we going to do about it? And, I mean, as a 22-year-old male, full of like bravado, false bravado, whatever, and just like kind of, to be honest, I was kind of spoiling for a fight. Like back then, it was, as a young man who was fit and active, and like, I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to test myself. I wanted to, and so I was like, well, if I'm going to go and fight, I want to do it with the best people around me. And I want to do the hardest thing I can do to prove, one, that I can, and to prove to myself that I can. And also so that when I find myself in the fight, I'm surrounded by people who had to prove themselves through that pipeline too, and are going to stick around and stand by me and fight. So that was it. It was just like we were punched in the mouth, and I wanted to do something about it. And I had the opportunity and able body to do so. And keep in mind, I mean, that was 2001. I was still I finished college. So, I mean, I feel like I gave myself a cooling off period of a couple of years where I could have like talked myself out of it or been like, oh, it's not my fight or whatever. But at the end of that time, I was like, I sat with myself and thought about it. And I was like, I have to do this, and I'll regret it forever if I don't. And so I did.
And you're glad you did?
Yeah, I'm glad I did. It didn't go the way that I thought it would. So I was in that special operations preparation and conditioning course. I was really doing well in that. I was excelling. And then in like June of 2004, I had a heat stroke in training. So my body temperature got up to 106.7. I blacked out on a run and woke up in an ambulance. And at the time, any kind of injury or something like that, and you would be dropped from training. And so
for heat stroke
or broken leg or whatever, like if you can't continue on the training, they can either hold you as a med hold or they have to let you go, and then you can come back and try again when you're better.
Wow.
And so I was put on a medical waiver, and then one of my cadre, so the cadre are your instructors in these courses, and these guys are actually like, they are Green Berets, and they're Green Berets who were on the invasion of Afghanistan. Like, they're guys who we read about in books. And now these are the guys that are teaching us. And so my cadre went into the first sergeant and was like, hey, this guy's a really good dude. He had a heat injury, but was performing really well. And so I think we should try to keep him around and let his they put you on a profile, which is basically like, hey, he has to do light duty for 90 days to make sure this doesn't happen again, but let's keep him. And at the time they were sending people away. So that was really great. And that's something that stuck with me a lot. And, so while I was waiting for my profile to clear, some of my buddies continue on with the pipeline, training pipeline, and they pass one of these milestone gates. Because it's a 2-year long training program. So it's like
specifically for the Green Beret.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can be up to 2 years.
Okay.
It might be shorter depending on your job specialty and all those things. But so anyway, after this prep course, you go to selection. After selection, you do another prep course. Then you are in the Special Forces qualification course, just like anybody else that's coming from inside the Army or whatever. But you're a relatively new to the Army. They call us like 18 babies or whatever, because we're right off the street, and now we're in the same pipeline as the traditional path to Special Forces in the Army was. You'd be in for 4, 5, 6 years and then try out. So you're an older, seasoned person, and now it's like, because of the requirements of GT score, college degree, they're like, we're getting more mature guys who are more capable, but they don't have Army experience. And so a couple of my guys come back from passing selection, and we go out on the town, and I'm driving, and we come back through the gate, and some of those guys had open containers of alcohol, and I got an open container ticket, and that they had like, hey, we can't, you have to go needs of the Army, because this is like an alcohol violation. And so they sent me down the street. So in Fort Bragg, there's Special Forces, there's some aviation corps, and then the 18th Airborne Corps and the 82nd Airborne are in Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty. And those are conventional Army, big Army units. But the 82nd Airborne is a pretty storied and well-known fighting force. Paratroopers, they just infantry. And so I was sent down the street to them, and at that time, that was like the first big major setback to my development, where I was like, man, I didn't see this coming. Everything was going well. I had an injury. Okay, I'm going to work through that. This little life event thing, which is, at the time seemed so inconsequential, now has big ramifications, because we were told that the 82nd Airborne was where you went if you couldn't hang. Like if So I go down there with a bias about these guys aren't as good, or these guys don't know what they're doing, and that I was proven completely wrong in the first 5 minutes. I'm so thankful for my time in the 82nd Airborne. And so I show up to the 82nd Airborne. I check my ego. I don't show up with any kind of bad attitude. I'm just like, I'm here. Let's do this. And so 4 months later, I'm on a plane with those guys to Iraq, to Operation Iraqi Freedom. And So I went. We landed in like right after Thanksgiving of 2004, and stayed until late spring, I think, of 2005, and fought in Iraq.
What was your like emotional state going into that? Were you scared, excited? Like,
I was scared because the whole point and plan of me getting the Special Forces contract was to be around what I perceived as an outsider to be the best warfighters.
okay.
And so because of my own actions, I was going down the street and thought, like, I'm going to be with lesser trained and equipped and capable soldiers, and that's going to put me at greater risk. But it didn't really sway my desire or intent to go inflict some sort of retribution or, revenge or whatever you want to call it back then. But then once I got to the 82nd and realized, like, a lot of these young men had been on the invasion of Iraq, and they were very seasoned soldiers, and they were very squared away, and they were very professional, and their leadership was very good. And so all of those concerns about, like, these guys are going to get me killed evaporated. And if anything, I was like, I have to show up, and I have to make sure that I'm doing the best I can to make sure that I'm doing right by these guys. So yeah, I was in Iraq for 2 combat tours. It was Operation Iraqi Freedom 2 and 3, but 1 deployment. So 1 single deployment, but it covered 2 combat. And the reason they change those combat tours is usually the mission changes. So OIF 2 was all about getting Iraq secure enough for those elections. If you remember from that time frame where people would have the blue fingerprint to show that they were eligible to vote, and we were giving them their first free democratic elections and all those things.
Wow.
And so that first mission was very much like finding people who were threatening to impede or disrupt that process and capturing or killing them. So that the people who lived there felt safe enough to come out and vote. Because at the time, bombers were blowing up voting lines, and there would be lines of people volunteering to be police officers, and they'd blow those lines up. And so there was just a lot of like internal. We dislodged the government, and so that creates a vacuum, and the vacuum creates opportunity for chaos. And so we were there solely to like try to level that out and allow the democratic process to happen. And then after it did, OIF 3 kicked off, and that was more like a peacekeeping mission. And so our operational tempo decreased, and we were more like doing presence patrols. And that's when I would hand out, beanie babies to little girls out there. The women in Iraq, I don't know how it is now, but at that time kind of got the short end of the stick. The sons were revered, men were revered, and women were sort of more like got the short end. So if I saw a little girl out there sweeping her driveway or something, I'd sidle off and hand her a beanie baby or something. But anyway, came back from that into 05, and all I wanted to do was get back into the pipeline to be a Green Beret. I just wanted more.
Really?
I wanted more of it. I wanted more impact. I wanted more access to doing impactful things. And so I went and dropped my packet, just like a normal Army guy now, to go to Special Forces Assessment and Selection in the spring of 05, summer of 05.
Wait, can I pause you?
Sure.
So the thing that was most alluring about going back was making an impact?
Yeah, I just wanted more war. Like, war was, it was exciting. It was exhilarating. It was terrifying. It was very, like, feral and just sort of like caveman lizard brain
like wild
stuff. And especially at that time. And like, being with the guys and doing the hard jobs and the missions. And I lost friends on that trip, and it didn't deter me. It didn't sway it. If anything, it galvanized me and just confirmed that, like, and I still had great friends that I'd come all the way through that training pipeline with that were now getting to their teams with Special Forces groups and being like, Sean, you got to get over here. Like, it's great. And like, we could use you and all that stuff. So they were gassing me up. That's where I wanted to be. I also wanted to see it through because I didn't want to just like abandon that. That was the whole reason I was there. And so I went back to selection. Selection's like a month-long process, various, trials and tests and psyche evals and all those things. And I completed that first, and I had just gotten back from Iraq. So I didn't have time. I was really strong because we had a weight room, but I had not done a lot of like ruck marching, long distance movements, things that you need to do to prepare your body, your feet for those kinds of like land navigation exercises. And so that first try at Special Forces Selection, which had to be like the late summer, early fall of 05, I didn't pass. I finished it, I finished the selection process, and they bring you before the review board, and they're like, you weren't selected. And I was like, okay. And they're like, but you're welcome to come back, because they could also say you're not selected and you can never come back. And that's usually people who flag on their psych profile or something that alerts them like this is not a good fit for this community. But I was invited back. I lost 9 toenails. The bottoms of my feet had come off, and my don't look at my feet. and so I took a month off. I was bummed. I remember calling because you don't have any phones or anything. You're locked down for a month, and called my parents on the pay phone and said, "Hey, I'm okay." I was like, "I didn't make it." I was upset. I was like, "But I didn't quit. I've been invited back." And so I took a month off, and by this time, my 82nd unit had redeployed to Iraq. And so I was what's known as rear D. So you're kind of in the back, and it's either guys who are short timing it, like they're going to get out, or they're on profile, like something that restricts them from deploying, or they're like me, where they're in a specialized school or course, and like you can get out and you'll be sent to catch up to your unit. And so I came back from selection, and I sat with myself for a minute and was like, how bad? Because now I've been through selection. I was like, that kind of sucked. And not so bad. I mean, but I was just like, I don't know if I want to do it again.
Yeah.
That's one of those things you really just want to do one time and then be done with it. And, but I was like, no, I wouldn't be able to live with it if I didn't try it until I couldn't. And so I went back a month later and crushed it and got picked up, got selected.
I went back to Iraq.
No, I got selected to go to the Special Forces qualification course to earn my Green Beret.
So you have to do another.
Oh, so now now I've passed selection. Now I'm in the training pipeline.
And so you have to pass the training.
Yeah.
So you have to like get into the training.
Yeah, the selection's just to say, do we think you're worthy to try? And so I passed selection I was the second class of 2006, but it ran like over Thanksgiving. So I was out there for Thanksgiving, which is kind of funny. And have some more stories about that. But I passed in like December of 05. It was the second class of fiscal year 06 for the Army. I did some block leave. I came home. Shelly and I were dating long distance at that time, and had a fun New Year's and stuff. And then I went back and started getting ready for the Q course, which is what's known as like the Special Forces qualification course. And I was going to start that in the spring. And now I'm in the course where now you're learning how to be a Green Beret. So you're doing small unit tactics. You're doing your basic platoon leader courses, and you're doing your specialized schooling. So in the Green Beret community, there's a weapons sergeant, a demolition sergeant, a communications sergeant, a medical sergeant. So you pick one of those tracks, and then there's a training. So I'm in the Q course, and this is now the summer of 06. It's on my birthday, June 1st. I was turning 26, and we were out on like a run in North Carolina, which at 6 a.m. on June 1st, it's 100 degrees. The humidity is 100%. And I woke up on a helicopter, and I had another heat stroke.
Oh my God.
And this one was 108 degree core temp heat stroke, and almost killed me. And a couple guys almost died that day.
What?
And so
you weren't the only one. There were others.
There were 2 other guys that had heat injuries. I think I might have been the most severe because I was put on a helicopter and flown out of the training area back to like the main part of Fort Bragg. And I just knew. I mean, when I came to and figured out what had happened, I was like, that's going to be it, because there's no way they're going to let you. What I learned about heat strokes was that if you have one, you're more susceptible to having another, because your body, the part of your brain that controls your temperature allows it to get higher and higher and higher. And so I lobbied the med board and was like, and they're like, yeah, you could reclass to a non-combat arms, non-airborne, non-deployable MOS. So basically be like a clerk or something, and never deploy again. Never. And I like, or you can take a medical separation and get out
from the whole Army.
So that's what I did.
Oh my God. So you were like so close to this, like
felt like it, and it felt like I'd earned it. It felt like I'd really paid my dues to be there, and I wanted to be there. And so that was the first time that I really had like a big hole blown in my identity, where I'm like, for the last, not just the last 3 years in the Army or 4 years in the Army, but for the 2 years leading up to that, I've been Sean, who's going to be the something with Special Forces. And so now it's like, you're not going to be that. And so, yes, I had a degree, and I had a solid relationship with my girlfriend, and I had friends, and I had my family, but I had like now at 27, I was like, I have no identity because I'd not thought that far ahead. I was like, I'd not made a plan to do. I probably wasn't going to be in the Army forever, but I had no plan beyond that immediate goal. And so I came home in the fall of 2007, like late fall, early winter of 2007, and was out of the Army. And that was it. So that part of my life and chapter was closed. And that was probably, like I said, that was the first big, thinking back on my like young adulthood and stuff, that was the first big like, oh shit moment of like, what am I going to do from here?
So what was like the feeling? You just worked your ass off for all these years. Like, I mean, I can't imagine like what you've been through, and then like it's all over in a second.
Yeah, it's about like you would think it felt. I mean, it was just like that, where I was like, and I had a lot of good things going in my life, and so, soldiers come back from war and have trouble readjusting and trauma and post-traumatic stress, and I think it's sort of become a catch-all. And people want to equate that to the trauma of war, and that certainly can be. I know people who saw a lot more than I saw that are a lot better than me, headspace than me, and I know people that saw a lot less than me that have taken their own lives. And so I think it's we try to paint everybody with a single brush, and we say PTSD is it, but PTSD can be, in my experience, again, these are all my opinions, but like I believe that PTSD can be derived from like the loss of that life.
Yeah.
And I loved it so much, and I loved my friends in the Army are still my best. I have a handful of really close friends from college. I have my immediate family. I have my closest friends are from the Army. And then I have friends that I made post-Army that I love very much. But I did not want to be out of the Army. And so to be cast out of the Army for an injury, the emotions ranged from, I felt a lot of shame. I felt like a loser because like, you're in that very like alpha environment of like, if you can't do it, just quit. If it's too much for you, go. And like, I never quit. And, and my reward for that was running myself into a heat stroke. At a time when a lot of guys were falling out of runs and things like that. And I just ran, they changed the course after that, where they said, hey, you can't run them this far at this time of year because they'll die. Like they'll run themselves into the ground. And so, but that didn't do me any good. I was out. Yeah. And so, I just, I felt lost, but but I also knew there was nothing I could do about it.
Yeah.
There's no getting that back. I mean, when you're medically separated, there was no jumping over to another branch it's just done, and it's not my fault. But I mean, that's like the tough part for somebody who's been conditioned and encouraged. You tell little kids that if you want something bad enough, you can get it if you work hard enough.
Yeah.
And so, but the part you don't want to tell them because it's discouraging. But the truth is, you can work really, really hard and still not get it.
Exactly.
And,
in lots of areas of life,
in lots of
and lots of careers,
right.
and lots of relationships.
Yeah. You can work your tail off, and sometimes shit happens, and that's unfair, and you'll feel all different kinds of ways about it. But that's the reality. And like, I think, again, like, would it have changed anything? If I would have known that was going to happen, would I have changed what I did? No, because like, I'm so thankful for the time that I had in the military and the friends that I made and the experiences that I did have. Those went a long way to shape me as a person. And, I think you ask any successful person, like there are people that I served with that they just made it look so easy. Like they just got through every phase of that training pipeline on the first try, and, or physical specimens are just like really perfect for that thing. Like, and so you look at that and you're like, man, that person's got it made. But I mean, I think any successful person would tell you that the best lessons that you're ever going to get about yourself are the ones you learn in adversity. Yeah. And it's very easy when things are going your way to be like, yeah, I'm tough, or I can withstand, or I'm built for but like when you don't really know that about yourself until everything's going wrong, until things have fallen apart. And that's when you can really assess your character and find out what you're made out of.
I love that. And I think that's part of what's problematic about like, let's make it easy or let's make it comforting. Like, let's make it, everybody wants to have it on the first try and have it come easy. And you can't blame people for that, but also like, then you don't I tell my clients, it's like the sacred struggle, like let those people struggle.
Yeah.
And that's can be complicated because I don't want people to be hurt, but.
Well, and those guys, the standard is the standard. So they just met the standard on the first try.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that it was easier for them.
Yeah.
They made it look easy,
Yeah.
but they were doing the same hard thing,
Yeah.
but they just made it look like you never, because a lot of folks going through these courses, it's not uncommon to get a rollback. Hey, you failed this one, but you're going to roll back and start over or something. Like it's never a linear path. But yeah, that was when I came home in 2007. It was just like, what the hell, And so I had to deal with a lot of that, and I settled into a job. My brother's wife, my sister-in-law, her brother had a little business. And they were like a distribution company selling skincare into like resorts, hotel spas, day spas. And because I didn't have that direction, I had this degree, but like I didn't come out and be like, I should go to grad school, or I should go join the police force, or I should go do something. I just sort of came out and I was just sort of there, and was like, because I didn't have a direction or a driving force, which was for the years prior, was so much of how you get yourself to get up and go work out and run and swim and train. It's like, I'm moving towards this goal. Without a goal, I was just sort of like, well, I guess I just exist now. And so it was, these guys offered me a job, and I was like, sure. I mean, it was like, was it something I started out as like their operations manager. So just like organizing their office and inventory, and they're a small little startup company, and I would travel a little bit, and I made enough money to buy a little condo downtown. And like Shelly moved out here from St. Louis, and I was having fun with my friends here and skiing, and like life was, it wasn't like I was holed up and just like moping around, but I didn't feel really a sense of like purpose or direction. I just was kind of okay with just being present and doing these things. But
can I ask you, like, the word you used earlier is like, I wanted more war. And so then you're like in a condo skiing, like selling skincare. Like going from like something that is like so life or death, so chaotic, something that like most people will never understand, to a normal life. Was that transition hard for you?
Absolutely. I think that's a big part of what gets veterans is like, I took up motorcycles. I'd never ridden a motorcycle before. And I was like, I need a hobby where if I don't pay attention, it might kill me. And so I went and learned how to ride motorcycles and bought a Harley and started riding motorcycles. And I think that it's just like, now listen, like the operational tempo in the military is a lot of like extreme boredom paired with like extreme small sections of just like chaotic mass panic, like the craziest thing you ever imagined, then right back to extreme boredom. And so like, it's not always the glamorous, like movie cool guy lifestyle, but it is like, it's sort of the shared experience of like, even going through those courses and those selection courses where it's miserable, you kind of in a sick way start to like relish how miserable it is, and like how you're going through it together, and like, and like the bonds that forges with people, where I could meet somebody who was an infantryman somewhere else I've never met, and immediately we find that out about each other, and there's just like this kind of immediate rapport where we just can kind of be at ease and like know that we're going to probably laugh at some of the same things and like have been some of the same places. And so it's tribe, it's tribal, it's community. And so it's not, I think everybody searches for that, whether you're military or otherwise. We all search for belonging and community and understanding and shared experiences, because it makes you feel like a part of a fabric. And so when that fabric is ripped away, that's where a lot of vets fall into drugs, alcohol, gambling, violence, domestic, because they're chasing a part of themselves that it's hard to just acknowledge and recognize that that's gone, because you don't want it to, especially you don't want it to be.
Well, and I can imagine too, like, I mean, that type of community where like your lives depend on each other, right? Like
nothing else like it.
Right.
I can't imagine.
Nothing else like it.
It's
I've
not
never
like
experienced
me
that.
and you like at yoga class in
Yeah,
our
it's not the
community,
same.
right?
And it's the greatest, it's like the greatest, I don't want to use the word social experiment, but it's like people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
There were people in my platoon that I hated.
Yeah.
And if we were on the street and they were on fire, I don't know if I would have put them out. But I trusted them with my life, and I knew that if the chips are down, they'd have my back, and we don't have to like each other, but I'll fight for you, and you'll fight for me. And that means people with different political backgrounds, all of those things get dialed down. And the important part is we're all we have, you know? And so, yeah, I guess if I think about that transition period from
before you go into that transition period, what are the other misnomers about veterans? Like, what are we missing?
Okay, and I want to know what you would tell a what do you want lay people to know about the military? Can we?
Yeah. So, well, that's a very complicated question.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's a good one. Because again, like, you know, my opinion and beliefs now have been shaped by, I've been out of the Army for 4 times as long as I was in it. But those 4 short years did so much more to shape me as a person than the 16 or whatever following. Don't make me math. Don't make me math in public here.
We would never.
But I got out in 07, so it's, you know, so almost 20 years. I mean, just shy. I mean, I have my friend that was just out here is retiring, and we joined the Army on the same day.
Wow.
So he's retiring after 23 years in special operations, and so like people have had whole careers, and I've been out for 16, 17 years. But yeah. So what we should know about veterans is that. And one of the things that really helped me turn the corner during that time was a good friend of mine who served within the 82nd Airborne, Derek Wida. He was around the same time I was having my heat stroke. He was on the surge in Iraq, and he got shot through the knee on a raid, side to side. And he ended up. They tried to save his leg, but he'd undergone something like 25 or 26 operations.
Oh my God.
His knee was non-functional. They tried to save his leg because he had a functional ankle. And doctors, anytime they can save a limb, they're going to save it. But what that meant for Derek was it was like a chain around his neck. Like it was a death sentence because he couldn't run. He couldn't work out. He couldn't do he wanted to stay in the military too. And they eventually pushed him out because you can't fight. Like you're damaged. You're broken gear. And so around that same time that I was going through my struggles, this was happening with him, and we sort of we knew each other in the service, but we weren't close friends. But I saw him struggling, and I saw him sort of posting some of these things, and I reached out. I was like, hey man, I was like, you know, I'm a little bit further down the path than you on this journey. I had my dream taken from me too. I'm here to tell you that like there's a lot of happiness out here for you to find still. You're gonna have to work a little harder to find it, but like. Keep living and keep trying, and because a lot of the stuff that he was sharing was like I'm at my wit's end, I'm at the end of my rope. And so eventually we connected. He came out here and ran a Tough Mudder with us on that leg, one of these big cross country endurance things, and on that bad leg, and like that helped to hear him tell it. It helped him pull himself up out of that space, and then it ruined his leg. And so then he was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I'm like, let you go back and ask the VA again one more time, and you tell them that if they don't amputate your leg, because he had wanted an elected amputation all those years. I said, tell them if they don't do it, we're going to privately raise the money to have it done, and we're going to make sure we tell everybody who will listen how the VA will do it. And they did it. They gave him his amputation, and they gave him a leg. And like most people, you wake up missing a leg, and you're like, oh. He woke up missing a leg and had that. He says he had that moment of panic, but also was like, free. And so he could start living his life again. So born of that experience, he spun up a thing called The Next Objective. He asked me to be a part of it. And it was just more of that of like giving veterans purpose-driven fitness. We would write grants for veterans to have gym memberships and adaptive medical equipment. We would host local community workouts and bring veterans out to work out together and then go get a meal. And that's when I really felt like I got better, was I had something to channel some of those feelings into something positive, and that stayed with me, and that's gone. That's what I really try to do now. When you say, how do I do it? That was a big lesson learned through that experience. And so what he and I would say about veterans is like, there's a stigma around them that they're broken or they're damaged. And you know, it's interesting. The veterans are culpable in this too, because it almost becomes like we fought a war for 20 years, and everyone in the military during that time gave up something. But within the veteran community, I think just human nature, there's a desire to be like, make sure that people know your experience was just as hard as somebody else's, or maybe you feel insecure that your experience wasn't as hard as somebody else's. Like, so I was an infantryman with the 82nd Airborne. You tell that to somebody who was a clerk, they'd be like, wow, infantryman with the 82nd Airborne. to me, I'm thinking of like, I'm looking up to the guys who were Green Berets or don't. And so like, there's always like this comparison thing. And so it almost feels a little bit like we got into this habit of where veterans, in order for you to believe that they did something meaningful or that they fought a war, they have to display a little bit of brokenness. They have to be a little bit, oh, I can't be around normal people, or I don't, they wear patches on there that say I don't play nicely with others, and those kind of, like, you sort of project this image of like being this fringe corner. I can't reintegrate because I've seen too much.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, maybe that's true, but like statistically, probably not. And like, don't think that of yourself. Don't think that little of yourself. Believe that you can do any job. For a long time, people coming back from war or combat units, like, well, you can be a cop, or you can be, and like, it's a great profession. But like, you could be anything. You can be anything you want. So like, I think what I would tell, as much as my message to you of what we should think of veterans, my message is also to veterans to like, sky's the limit for you. You've already proven that you're capable of these hard things. You have so many skills, and sometimes you just need help translating those into the right words or series of words on a resume. But like, you can be anything, you can do anything. So don't sell yourself short. Don't paint yourself to be a victim. Like, remember that you're badass. You are the best. And so like, go and find that. Don't lose sight of that. And then, so then my message to other people who aren't veterans is like, just treat them like normal, normal people. I think that if we treat people like they're broken, sometimes that they sort of, then that's what they'll be. And I think it's okay to like, the biggest thing you can do is just let them know that you see them like anyone else who's undergone it. Like, you see them, but at the same time, I don't think they need to be coddled. I think they need to be held accountable like everybody else. And I think that they're capable of doing great things, and I want them to know that about themselves. And then what was your question around the military?
Just like, what would you want lay people to know? Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I have like my own judgments and misconceptions about the military and people who join it, right? Like, sitting with you, it's changing a little bit. And I'm like, oh, you want community and purpose just like I do. You went to the military, I went to therapy school, right? So like, whatever, it's just a different flavor. But like, what would you like tell someone, or what would you want a lay person to know with these like maybe negative judgments or perceptions? Yeah,
I would just say the same thing. Where like, a demographic of people is largely unique, and the military is no different. And so the fact that we have a military now that is an all volunteer fighting force, I think that's great. And everyone has their own reasons for joining. So like, somebody may join because, you know what, I do come from an underserved or disadvantaged community, and the military is a pretty good deal for getting access to education. Now, I wish that I believe in things like Job Corps and like Habitat. Like, if there should be other mechanisms of where you give service and your reward is access to more education, whatever opportunity. But the military does a good job of that. And so like, if you join to get the college money, good for you. You still join, and you still like anyone who's been in the military, especially, because you're usually a younger person, like, it's taught you to be uncomfortable. You don't, like, and all the branches have their own stigmas around who takes best care of their people. It's the Air Force. And who has the nicest facilities, all those things. But at some point, you sacrifice to be 18, 19, 20, and to be like, I am no longer in charge of my time is a big deal. And it's hard. And it's hard to be like, go through, not just in the training, but even when you're in the military, it's like, wake up is at this time, formation is at this time, we go work out, we go have breakfast, we start training. You're not released until your command releases you. So like, we're cleaning weapons, we're picking up cigarette butts, we're doing like all these things. And it's like, it's easy to be, you remember how you were as a teenager, like, everything sucks anyway. And then when someone's telling you to do like this grunt work, you're like, ugh. But it teaches you to be like uncomfortable and like, be a little bit more like, let go a little bit and just like go with it. And it is one of those things where like, you'll get out what you put in. And so what I would want people to know about the military is like, there's always going to be people who are there for the wrong reasons, or there to take advantage or whatever, just like there would be with any demographic of people. But I do think that it's admirable to go and serve your country, whatever. And even if the rationale is that helps you get access to your future or whatever, you're still doing it. You're still raising your right hand. You're giving the oath, and you are going at the needs of the country. And so putting yourself in harm's way, and, people get injured and die in training accidents also. Even if we're not at war, I think it's very admirable and an honorable thing to do. And so I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it's like, you don't get a pass because of that. In fact, my expectations for you now are a little higher because you have endured and you've pushed yourself through this hardship. And so I expect more of you. And so again, it gets back to like not letting anybody give themselves a pass or an out to be a bad person, or, I'm expecting more of you because I believe in you so much.
It's interesting. One of the things we've talked about on the podcast and talked about with each other is, as a therapist, your job is to be like, well, let me see all your woundedness and brokenness and trauma, and then show up more compassionate than other people. Yeah. And also, one of the lines I really struggle with is, I don't want to enable my clients, and I don't want to say, well, something hard happened to you, and so you get to behave poorly, or you get to feel bad for yourself even. And the lines of feeling bad for yourself, self-pity, self-compassion, all of those pieces, I don't quite personally think our field has figured out how to really hold people accountable and also show up compassionately and respectfully and treat trauma in a way that like really empowers people. Yeah. Some people do it better than others,
Well, and you have to move through it. I think like that's the advice that I gave to Derek and that I've given to a lot of vets since is like, look, you don't have to have this figured out tomorrow. I was like, it's, but you have to show up. And like, sometimes you show up and that means I got out of bed and got dressed today. Yeah. And like, it's okay to have bad days, and it's okay can't tell you not to feel self-pity because, you feel it. But I was like, the important thing is that you don't let it become your identity, and like, you don't allow it to become, I didn't know, it wasn't really until I moved through that process of discharge from the Army, couple years floating around, and then started working with a nonprofit. And again, just circling back, like I had employment, I had gainful employment, and I had my girlfriend then, now wife there, and I had all these positive things. So I did maintain a lot of gratitude. I was like, I got out with all my parts, and I'm not, physically. Now mentally, there were some challenges there that I think I didn't realize at the time. And also telling people that I was medically separated without a physical wound was hard because it's like, what happened to you? Like, fine. I'm like, why had a heat stroke? And then people hear heat injury and they're kind of like, that could just be like tiny heart syndrome or something. You know what I mean? And what we used to call for like somebody who was weak or didn't try tiny heart syndrome. Right. And so, but really, like, it's, you move through it and you allow, and like, so again, these are all, it's easy to me to look back on it now and speak like, well, here's how it is. But I didn't know it at the time. I just knew like, hey man, be grateful, have gratitude, do your best, show up, and like, don't feel like you have to have this all sorted out right now. I didn't have a direction, I didn't have a path, but I trusted that I would find one. And like, and I also, what I told Derek was like, my new passion is just happiness and trying to find it and trying to be happy and trying to enjoy being alive and not be sad or resentful or mournful of things that are no longer part of my life that I can't control and can't get back. And it worked for me. And I don't know, you can't say if someone's battling clinical depression, you can't say telling someone not to be anxious.
Yeah,
right? So I don't have all the answers, but what I can say from my experience is that, and what I would go to my deathbed saying is gratitude and hope go a long way. And sometimes it's easier to find those things than others. But gratitude for what you have right now in this moment, and hope for the opportunity to find more, gain more, get more, do more, be more, goes a long way. Just kind of keep your feet moving. And if you do those things, and if you do show up, and if you do keep an open heart and open mind, and you keep trying new things, and you don't let yourself get mired down in like the sight of just being this miserable, hateful, resentful person, then odds are something is going to shift for you, and you'll find something new to pursue. And if you don't, the worst thing you can do is quit and end your life, because now you've definitely concluded there is no more chance for you. Tomorrow could be the day that you round a corner. You just have to, but you'll never know if you don't give it a chance. Yeah. And so that's been helpful.
And I'm hearing just like a lot of patience, like, and a willingness to not need the answer right now, which I feel like sometimes we're not very good at, of like,
who is?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to be like, I don't know how this is all going to end up, or where this all, or what I even have hope for.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a piece too that I think.
And also, if some poor if a guy just like me moves back to his hometown and has no family, or everyone's abusive, or everyone's on some, a drunk, and there's just no light, it's very easy for me to sit here in my place of privilege with like a loving family, good support system, good friends, college education, and be like, well, just give it a second, guy. Yeah. So I mean, I get that. Yeah. It's easier said than done. It's easy, and like I recognize the opportunities and privileges I have, but I've been through some stuff that was pretty hard for me too. And it's the way I found my way through it was, one, stay open, talk about it, talk to my friends, talk to my loved ones, and two is just patience. Exactly right. Yeah, just like give it time to do something.
Yeah.
Is this a misconception that like veterans don't get enough support, and when they leave they're kind of treated like shit?
I think that's a misconception. I think the modern VA is doing the best that it can. We have 20 years worth of veterans. I think the sins of how we treated Vietnam veterans are something that's mandated a lot of that change. The VA is not perfect. It's and how could it be? And there's so many people, but it's trying. I mean, it really is. And so like, I know that a lot of my friends would hear this and roll their eyes and be frustrated with me, and I get that because their experience is their own. I did not have, so when I was medically separated, I did not get a disability rating because I technically elected to be separated. But having recently worked with the VA, because I've noticed some cognitive things and talked with, and I've gone in for my appointments, like technically speaking, those heat strokes should have been treated like TBIs, like traumatic brain injuries, because they were. Wow. But back then they were just like, so they didn't know, or I don't want to say they purposely intentionally misled me, but I should have probably been med boarded and medically retired because of the impact of those events. And then shortly after I got out of the Army, I tore the meniscus in both knees and had that scoped, and not service related because I had private insurance and didn't want to go deal with the lines at the VA and the wait times. So there is that. The VA it's free, it's open, but that means you have to wait. That means your appointments might be far out. I think the VA has a historic problem of throwing a lot of opioids and drugs at the problem. Yeah. I think that, but in terms of like, I know more people now than ever that have disability rating, that get financial support, and the intent is to like use that financial support and use the VA resources to seek therapy, to do the things. You don't just get the money, doesn't fix anything. You have to use that to do the things that you need to do and create access. So it's again, point of privilege. It's easy for me to say the VA is doing the best they can because I haven't had to rely on the VA till recently for treatment and things of that nature. But whenever I've gotten a thing in the mail saying you have an appointment, it runs pretty smooth. I show up, I have the appointment and those things. So I just have a very narrowed focus of how it's working, but I think they're trying.
What about mental health care? Like, my question really is, and you speak to this if I'm incorrect, but like, you're coming from this place where it's like, can I say the word bravado? I don't know, like masculinity, bravado, like you even said like tiny heart syndrome, and then like someone needs mental health care. Is it like stigmatized? What's that like?
So what I'm hearing from my friends, because I still have a kind of a direct line through, first degree of separation, talking to my buddies, is that it's changed a lot. Okay. There was a moment in time, even in the early global war on terror, where if you went to your chain of command and said, hey, I'm having a tough time, that could potentially flag you and take you out of while they get it sorted out. And so guys wouldn't do it. Or if they did that, they'd be afraid that maybe their buddies would, like, even if they don't pull you out of, active status, maybe your friends look over and be like, I don't know, Sean seems like he's going through some things. The last thing you want to be viewed at by your team in those places is unreliable. Right. You have to be reliable. Yeah. You have to be someone I can count on. You can't be somebody that I have to be worried that if I ask you to do something or ask you to watch this position or something, that you won't do it because of any reason. And so, but what I'm hearing is that as more of my friends are hitting retirement age, they have access to unit counsel and therapy and those things because they've realized it's a pretty short-sighted view to be like somebody asking for therapy is a detriment. It's like what they're realizing is like, and again, they have more time. They've had more of a sample size now to understand the impact of prolonged war. I mean, some of my friends have had 13 deployments.
Oh my God. Mm-hmm.
13 deployments.
Wow.
And like some of them are 6 months long, some of them are a year long. And that's like,
Wow.
if I left Phoebe today for a year, I don't know how I would go over there and focus.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be thinking about that, and these guys do that. These guys, and men and women, do that. They leave their families grow up without them. And also you're subjected to all this trauma, even if it's not direct combat trauma. It's trauma of being underway on a ship for 6 months, being on a submarine for 6 months, right?
Like that's a trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Watching your kids grow up through, and then you're away, and then like maybe your home life falls apart, and like there's just all these forces at work there that are. And so again, especially during the like global war, until the 20 years of war, I mean, people had kids 20-year-olds that were 0 and now are 20-year-olds. So I just think that it's again, I think they're getting better, but I also think I think the stigma has to be removed at the individual level, where people need to say, "Hey, man, you should go get some help. You should talk to somebody about that," and not make them feel weird about it, and like bring that to the surface. And I think leadership and command is doing a good job of that. But there is always going to be, these things don't turn very fast. And so like getting these alpha type males to realize like, hey, instead of going out and getting wasted, you should go sit. Maybe you shouldn't drink, actually.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we shouldn't be pouring gas in the fire. Maybe you should be trying something else. And so I hear, again, this is for, by way of my friends, that they're getting better about that.
Hi, Hannah here, interrupting this amazing episode with a quick announcement. I'm so excited to be facilitating a robust, impactful couples psychedelic therapy retreat this March 13th through 16th in the mountains of beautiful Colorado. Join us for an intentional long weekend that includes therapist-led workshops, refreshing downtime in a beautiful home, guided private couples psychedelic sessions, and larger group psychedelic journeys using various psychedelic medicines, and more. If one of your goals this year is to deepen your relationship, reconnect with your partner, or invite new passion and intimacy into your partnership, this retreat is for you. Check the show notes out for more information about the retreat.
So then like next objective picked up, I think, in earnest like around 2008, 9, 10. And I was basically like director of operations for that. Derek eventually named me as a co-founder, and I ran that. We helped him run that for 4 years, and we would just do grassroots fundraising. He's a pretty well-known social media presence for being like this one-legged fitness dude, and he's a really motivating, inspiring guy. And that was cool to see him. That was a big part of my healing, was helping him get better. And in turn, by him letting me do that, it helped heal me. And so he'd always be so grateful. And I was like, dude, I don't think you understand, like, you letting me help you has helped me as much, because, I needed to feel like I was of value and doing something for my community. And, I could have just as easily reached out, and he could have just as easily been like, I don't need any help. And that would have been the end of it, because I didn't have the energy to pursue. I'm not going to beg you to let me. Honestly, I didn't feel like I was doing anything. Like, it wasn't some grandiose gesture. It was something just as simple as like, come on out, man, run this race with us. And then we kicked off a series of events that helped us both. And so I ran that for several years. We'd do fundraisers. And I think in the end, we finally, he had kids, life got busy, so we kind of shut it down. But we raised, when all was said and done, we raised about $250,000
Wow.
to give away to vets. We had no, we didn't have any overhead, because we were doing it on the side of our day jobs and stuff. And so we would give, we gave away all that money, and we probably helped about 250-ish vets, because our average grant was around $1,000 for a gym membership or whatever.
So cool.
Amazing.
And that was really when I realized that a big part of me, a cornerstone of who I am, I think, is philanthropy, and it helps me process and get through grief and trauma, because it helps me channel all of those same feelings that anybody going through grief and trauma has into something positive, which in turn helps me pull myself out of the darkness a little bit. And so my parents, I love my parents. My mom we're very blessed. She's still with us. She's 80 as of last April. Hi, Mom. And, my parents, my family is a huge part of my life. I'm so thankful for them. Like, that really, like I said, was such a gift and a privilege growing up to have realized now just how close my family was. Not perfect, but like really great, and especially really great for the kids. I think my mom and dad, were tough on each other, but they were fantastic parents, amazing. And so my dad, especially, I have two older brothers, but they're my half brothers. They're from my mom's first marriage. And she went on to have this amazing like co-parenting thing with their dad, who's like been in my life and his wife. And so we've had this blended family, but I'm my dad's only natural born kid and a son. And so we were just super tight. My mom never was threatened by that or stood in the way of that. And so although she and I are close and the leverage to my mom, my dad and I were tight, father-son relationship. And so, losing him in 2018, he was 80 and a smoker. And it's one of those things that you know is coming, but you can never really believe that you're there facing it. And that was like a really, really tough part of my life. And and so again, this was one where it's totally natural. It was totally expected, but I just, that really blew a big hole in me too. And so, thankfully I had, I remember nights there with my wife, just like racking sobs of grief, just feeling like my heart was breaking. And it was the first time I'd really cried like that. And since, I really can't remember. I remember one time in 2007, I'd been out of the Army for a short amount of time. And a guy that I had served with me second got killed in Iraq. And I'm getting the call, and I'm sitting in my office desk selling skincare and just being like, what? Like, why am I so far away from this, And that was a tough one. But losing my dad was really the first time I think that was the biggest loss I'd felt maybe at that point in my life ever. And so, again, it was just time and gratitude, and then you start to navigating those experiences and having my wife to talk to and talk to my friends. I mean, I don't actively go to therapy because I feel like I get it every day. I mean, I share so freely of myself with the people around me, and they're welcome to do that with me. I think there's obvious value in having a trained professional to give you tools to do those things. I may still go to therapy, but I just at that point had not. And but I think that was the first time where I felt like I would get something out of using psychedelics, specifically psilocybin, to help. I had done some mushrooms in college as like a party thing, and I'd done some mushrooms up to that point as like a party thing, but I'd never really viewed them as treatment or as medicine or as a tool. And so with a little research, I started to dabble a little bit more into that, and very like intentional, like understanding dosing and doing calculations for body weight. And then I never went and worked with like a professional or a shaman, but would read about, research that sort of the importance of setting intent for the session and what you want to process. And so now I still use it as medicine, just like people use Advil today. And my approach has always been the same, which is, and what I've explained to a lot of my military friends is, it allows me to, first of all, it kills my ego. And so it allows me to, objectively look inside myself and analyze things or events or trauma or things that I'm having difficulty with. But I have full mental dexterity and mental acuity to kind of rifle through my Rolodex of things, pull out the specific card, death of my dad, or whatever, and be in that moment and sit with it. And like, it's not just, it helps me very vividly remember good memories. And I can remember feelings. I can remember love, and I can remember comfort and safety and all those things. And it just lets me process that in a very sharp and clear way, to where, I've expressed this analogy where, we've all been out with that friend who drinks too much and they cry at the bar. And I'm like, that person's trying to get something out, and they're screwing it up because alcohol is blocking it. But it doesn't. And what do we do? Because we're uncomfortable either in ourselves or for them. We're like, you're just drunk. Let's get you home. But like, they're trying to get something out. So I'm like, mushrooms allows you to, like, I could sit down and have that conversation about the thing that makes me sad and actually talk about it in a coherent way, instead of like babbling and falling over my words. And then also, like, the alcohol might free your inhibitions to tap into that thing or share that thing, but you don't remember it
Right.
because it's dulled your other senses. Whereas I feel like psilocybin allows me to like remember it. I cry or I laugh or I do whatever. I sleep like a baby. I wake up and I feel great. And I feel like I've exercised my brain. And I feel like, just like after a great workout at the gym, I feel that kind of clarity and dexterity. It stays with me for days or weeks, and the breakthroughs. And so that was when I really started kind of using it for that, because because the loss of my dad was so much, I was having a tough time talking about it. I'm having a tough time talking about it right now without some sort of assistance. And so a lot of the times the best breakthroughs I would have would be by myself. I'd have it by myself, and I'd just be at home and either put a movie on and then eventually maybe move and sit outside on the patio with some music. I'd write a lot. So it's been great. And I've actually, several of my military first responder friends, whether they're firefighter, EMS, paramedic, military, that are pretty straight edge dudes, because you can't really, you can't really recreationally participate in that stuff when you're in those jobs, but they're either getting out or they're out of the service. And I'm like, it's helped me a lot. And every single one of them has been like, yep, it's helped me a lot. And it's, again, it's like, I'm like, if there's one of those guys that I'm thinking of was a super straight laced guy. And we went, I think his first like real mushroom experience with me up at our cabin. And now he's been on like 2 ayahuasca retreats in Costa Rica.
Perfect.
And he's like fully in.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like, again, I'm like getting people off of opioids and prescription medication onto plant-based things. And then you start to learn more about how much this science was repressed and held back, and how these things were Schedule 1 and all that stuff. And it's like, because it stands in the way of pharma and opportunity, money, right? And so, so that was when I sort of really became comfortable in leveraging that as a way for me to just get more out of more catharsis and more healing and more growth out of those things, while still like not deadening me to the feeling and the emotion. That's what I think a big part of the problem with young people today and society today is we're so afraid of feeling the bad things. We're so afraid of feeling grief and loss and despair, because they are uncomfortable. And when you're in those feelings, you just want them to end. And when you're in those feelings, sometimes you feel like they never will. But I'm like, what I've learned through my experience is like, those are part of the human condition. There's really some beautiful things in there, because only through experiencing abundance and joy and happiness and love can you really understand the depth of loss and sorrow and grief and despair. Like, these things exist because of their counterparts. And so if you never let yourself feel the lows, you're really cheating yourself of the highs. So flash forward to 2020, my wife and I got pregnant with our first child, and a little boy named Rowan. And I named him Rowan Glenn because my father was Glenn, so he shared a middle name with my dad. And this was like during COVID, during pandemics. Like, I didn't get to go to any of the ultrasound appointments and all those things, but I'm going to be a dad, and I know how to do that because I had this great dad, and this kid's named after my dad. It's going to be amazing. And Rowan was born in late August 30th of 2020. And coming down the stretch there, they had noticed that he had a little thickening of his heart valves. I can't remember the medical term, but, one of Shelley's doctors was like, this could be like an indicator of Noonan syndrome or something, or it could be something more serious. But, at the onset of the pregnancy, she had done all the genetic screening for trisomy 18, for Down syndrome, and all that stuff had come back negative. And so this thing is surfacing late in the pregnancy. And like, if you get an amnio, there is a small chance that we rupture the sac and you lose the pregnancy. And we're like, well, because those tests ruled out those really bad things, and because the Noonan syndrome thing wouldn't shorten his life or diminish his quality of life, we'll let it ride. If he's a little different or a little special, we'll make that work. And he was born early. He was born a month early. And for 3 days, we were in the NICU at the Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children. And he was just a premature baby in the NICU, and it was great. And then they did a genetic screening based on some indicators that he exhibited when he was born. And I think on day 4 or something, we learned that he was born with trisomy 18. And trisomy 18 is generally a death sentence for kids. It manifests itself in a lot of different ways, but something about their body doesn't develop all the way, either neurologically, physically. What eventually took took Rowan from us was his body would allow too much CO2 to build up in his blood. And he wasn't breathing, like he couldn't breathe on his own. He couldn't survive without oxygen. So 10 days after he was born, we had to say goodbye to him and held him for the last time. And man, that was the lowest point in my life.
Yeah.
For sure. And the second one's not even close.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, navigating that and navigating it, first of all, I'm just so thankful for my partner, because that's one of those things that you probably can't make it on your own.
Yeah.
And, you know, talking to the staff that cared for us, they were like, you know, this is the kind of event that either galvanizes you or it drives a huge wedge, because maybe one parent wants to fight to keep the kid alive, one parent wants to let them go. Shelley and I were always on the same page, which is we don't want a life for him that is going to be so where he won't even be able to experience like the basic, you know, human joys or qualities. And the decision was made for us where they're like, well, before we can send him home, we have to take him off oxygen and see if he'll live. And he didn't. And so we walk out of the hospital on September 8th. My dad died on September 12th. Rowan died on September 8th. So it's September 11th. It's a weird month for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so we walked out of there, and it was just like fog of war. Like it was just like you're just sort of. I just remember sort of floating out into the world and driving home. And we're sitting on our back patio that day, and it snowed, which was pretty early for Denver. That, you know, and we're sitting back there just sort of quietly in this space of like, what the hell just happened? And a little hummingbird flew into the backyard. We'd never seen a hummingbird at that house. And so we have taken that to mean that was a sign, you know, that was him checking in on us. And we've sort of adopted hummingbirds as like the unofficial mascot of Rowan. But that was, you know, a really important lesson in my life that I still am going through, of how to live with that, and how do you find happiness and purpose when it's like that is like your world ending kind of sadness. When you take away people's kids, you take away their hope for the future, you know. And what it did though is it just, again, it was because I had Shelley and I had my family, and mostly Shelley and I. Shelley and I really circled the wagons there for that experience, and there was no shortage of people that wanted to help, but like nobody knows how to help with that.
Yeah.
And our friends didn't know what to do, and how could they? And we didn't know what we needed them to do. Like nobody has the answer. It's just like it's ruin and it's devastation. And so for 3 months, thankfully, we were both with companies that were just like, go away, come back whenever. And so thankful for that, to have, you know, we didn't have to go back to work, because I don't know what I would have done. And then we kind of poked our head for those first, it was basically, we were on our paternity leave. And so for those 3 months, we just sort of survived and just existed and hugged on the couch and cried alone and together, and would have to remember to eat some days and all those things. And again, you just have to, there's no rushing that. You just have to, and I think we clung to the hope. We clung to the gratitude that we had Rowan. All the different ways that could have shaken out, where he was stillborn or lost early, or we never got to meet him. And so, you know, we had him for 10 days. And for 3 days there, we were just new parents. And so like, you start to find all those little things to where it's like, and it's hard because it's easy to be, you know, I was making deals with a God that at the time I didn't know if I really believed in.
Yeah.
But I'm begging him to not take my kid. And so anyway, you move through that, and you move through it as best you can with just the gratitude that you have each other, and that you got to meet him and you got to hold him, and for the lessons, you know, that weren't readily apparent at that time, but became apparent. And then also the hope, where it's like, maybe we get another crack at this. You know, we had waited to have kids till we were older on purpose. And so now it's like, now the clock's kind of working against us. And so, you know, flash forward, a year later, we're without any IVF or anything, we're pregnant again with Phoebe. And, man, and just, you know, if that hadn't happened, if we hadn't had her, I don't know if the outcome is quite as inspiring work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's, like I said, it's easier to look back on it now and be grateful and happy because in my mind, like we have her.
Yeah.
And if we didn't, I don't know, but we do. And so now thankfully I get to look at it and get to, what Shelly and I did is on the 1-year anniversary of Rowan's life, we wanted to do a little something to channel some of those feelings into something positive. So we did a little fundraising just among our network. And then we also organized food deliveries 2 times per day, one for the morning shift and one for the night shift, to the nurses in the NICU. Again, gratitude for the NICU and for the staff and for people who have that as their calling. It has to be a calling because, like, being a hospice nurse, being a NICU nurse, being a therapist, I mean, you realize that these people like yourselves, I mean, like, I can't imagine those NICU nurses were right there in the room with us and were feeling a lot of the same things we were feeling. And then they had to go home and make dinner for their kids or their partners and get up the next day and come right back to work and do it all over again for another family. And so we were like, we want to do something for them. It was really awe inspiring to meet and work with those people. And so we raised some money. We fed the staff for a week. And then we ended up raising almost $50,000.
Wow.
And so I was contacted by the Rocky Mountain Children's Health Foundation, and they said, what do you want to do with this money? And I said, I don't know. What do you need? You know? And I was like, I'd like it to be something more permanent. Like if we could name a room after him, or if there's a piece of equipment that you need. And they're like, well, there is this special project that we've been trying to find some funding for called the Zen Den, which would be a relaxation room for the staff. And I'm like, that's it. That's what this is for. And so we worked with them over the next 3 years. We finally cut the ribbon on that this last March. And it's on the NICU floor there at the Rocky Mountain Hospital for Children. It's Rowan's Zen Den. And it's got a massage chair and comfy blankets and aromatherapy and white noise and a beverage cooler. And it's funded. That the chunk of that money is an endowment that will keep that funded and refreshed and updated forever. And so that is Rowan's legacy, is now the people that cared for us, we will care for them. And born of that experience, I was actually approached to join the board of directors for that foundation.
Wow.
And I was just elected into the vice chair role a few months back in September. So when you ask me, what was I told would make me happy versus what has made me happy? You know, I feel very fortunate that my parents' view on happiness was rooted in the right things. What I perceive to be the right things, which is time with each other and family and belonging. And we were encouraged to, give back, by either through very surface level stuff, like through the Cub Scouts or community service organizations in high school. But I think with that, it was a deep rooted sense of it could always be worse. Things are pretty, if you look around and assess what you have and take a moment to just be grateful for the air in your lungs and the sun on your face. And you may not have much, but the fact that you are here and you're present and you're alive means you have opportunity for something. And so I think that I was never pursuing material things or flashy things or expensive things. What I value are people, and I value. I just feel inherently better when I know that I'm doing something to help, and that could be a very small thing or it could be a part of a big thing. But I feel better, and I feel like a more true, whole, complete version of myself when I'm giving something back, and that. All the times in my life when I've been at the lowest, the way that I've helped myself is I've helped somebody else. I guess part of it is just who I am, is I will get back up. I will get back up. And I'm not saying that with any sort of false bravado or that's easy for me to get up. But what I've proven to myself is that I'll get up every time and I'll try again. And my wife is the same way. My wife is tough woman person. And, in that moment, and this is really personal, but I don't think she'd mind me sharing it, but I just mentioned to her the other day where they bring us into the room and they give us the genetic counseling and they're like, Rowan's probably not going to make it. And here's why. And then they're like, we'll give you guys some room. And it was like I was being shot at again for the first time. My vision narrowed, my ears are roaring. It's your body's going into like that full fight or flight mode, or what I would say is fight or fight for me. But you're just trying to survive. And my wife in the moment looks over and she's welling up and her world's falling apart too. And she's like, I'm still here. And she said, I'm still here. And I was like, how did you have the presence of mind to say that to me? Like, it's the perfect thing to say, because I felt so alone in that moment. But like, she was in it too. And right then I knew, like, we're in this together. And, for the year leading up to getting pregnant with Phoebe, and even the 9 months pregnant with Phoebe, there's the fear of like, and even though the doctor's like, that was an anomaly, it's probably not going to happen again, but how could you ever not think of that again? And so, I just, I don't know, part of who I am is that's just who I am as a person. Part of it is, having incredible people in my life that support me and lift me up and, allow me to lift them up. And, part of it is just like born of experience where, every one of these things that I've lived through and endured has set me up to navigate the next one. And you always, I've always tried to keep a pretty even keel, because when you're up, that's my dad was like, when you're up, you can always be down. When you're down, you can always be up. And so I try to just be in the middle and realize that when things are good, they're going good right now. And like, they're probably not going to be that way forever. But then when they're going bad, you know what? They're not going to be bad forever either. And you just have to give the sun a chance to come up and keep trying. And as long as you keep trying and keep endeavoring and keep working, then the odds are in your favor. So
this is by far and away the most tears we've ever had on this podcast.
I've never cried on the podcast.
I don't think I've ever cried on the podcast either.
This is like the most I've cried in a while. But it like just, I want to name, like, the world feels crazy right now. There have been times in my life where like my world has felt crazy. I mean, it's what you said, like, you can't avoid this shit. This is the human experience. And like, God, I would not wish this on anyone, but to feel that like moment with your wife, to feel that moment of giving back to your community. Like, and
honestly, like, it's losing Rowan has turned down the noise on all the bullshit. All of it. My perspective is totally different now. Ultimately, like, and this is again like the idea that you are responsible. It is your responsibility, no one else. And I think that it's very easy to blame or point fingers or say my life is this way because of this or because of that or because of this person, but it's you, and you have to decide what you're going to do about it. And that could include asking for help. Doesn't mean you have to fix it all by yourself, but you have to take responsibility and say, I need help. And either go get it or find someone to help you figure out what the next steps are. But like, and then you have to do the work. Nobody's going to go to therapy for you. No one's going to do the things that you need to do to get better for you. And so I'm very thankful for like the foundation. I'm thrilled to be a part of that. We've got, now that Rowan's Zen Den has been realized, I didn't just stop there. They said, they're like, well, we need our bereavement fund. We have bereavement. Child loss, unfortunately, is on the rise. What do we do about that? And I said, well, why don't we turn Rowan's Zen Den into Rowan's Fund, and we'll raise money for what do we need? And it's like better education and training for the staff because they have to live through these things too. And so you start to realize and appreciate perspectives that aren't just holding a dead child impacts more people than just the parents. And so like, what can we, and like, if we care for the caregivers, we in turn are caring for the families that they care for. And Shelly and I got the news that Rowan was going to die in a break room with like a microwave in it. Wow. So it's like, maybe we need a room for people to get that kind of thing that's a little more cozy and a little more of a, and so there's all these opportunities where, again, these things weren't there 12 months ago, but they're there now.
Wow. Well, you delivered on that one, Jade. You brought me someone good.
I sure did. And we could keep you forever, but we're already over time. We got to get you home to your sweet wife and your sweet baby. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me and for creating the space. And I really got a lot out of it. And
you've been listening to Are We Happy Yet? A Green Roof Studios production. This episode was recorded and produced by Hannah Buzzo and Jane Thatcher Hahn.
If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with someone you care about. Your support helps us reach more listeners. And for every rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we're donating to a charity connected to one of our guests. Check the show notes for more details on this month's featured charity.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.